I'm, and this webinar will be recorded just for everyone's info. So good morning again. My name is Michael Randall, Community Impact Director for the American Heart Association. I want to thank you all and welcome to day one of Doing the Work, Feeding Faith Leaders and Development Goals. This event is a part of a two-day series where we hope to provide information to housing development and housing development resources for faith-based churches, leaders, and organizations. Before we get started, we really have a jam-packed agenda today. I'm really excited to get started. But before we get started, I would like to pass it over to Bishop Edgar Van from Second Ebenezer Church, who is going to provide our invocation for this morning. So Bishop, why don't you give us a word of prayer?
Gracious God, our Father, how we thank you and how we praise you for this opportunity and for this privilege that we have to honor you and to give you glory and to give you praise this morning. We thank you for another wonderful day full of opportunities and potential that you have given us to be a beacon light for those who are in need, for those who are distressed. We ask, oh God, that as we go into this forum today, that you would release information and inspiration and impartation that not only blesses us, but challenges us, that we might be the repairers of the breach in our communities. We thank you for the American Heart Association and its broadness and scope and vision, that communities might be served holistically, not only in their health, but in the health of their community. Mm-hmm. Now bless us as we continue and as we learn and as we listen. We pray, oh God, that resources would flow, that vision would increase. We pray, oh God, that outcomes will come because we have dared to come together. Give us the unity, give us the strength that is needed in this hour, because so many people need help and are hurting. Help our hands and our ingenuity, our talents, our gifts come together in such a synergy that it brings hope and it brings healing to people everywhere. We'll be so careful as we enter into this opportunity to give you thanks and praise. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Bishop Van. And also, I will be remiss and I thank you for the years and years of service in the area of housing development and your service to your community. So thank you so much, Bishop Van, for that opening prayer. Today we have a great discussion lined up. We will start with introductions and goals, followed by a video. We're going to talk about some common challenges, advocacy, resources, and overcoming barriers. Then we will report back about our findings and close out day one of the webinar. And next, we would like to welcome the staff of Enterprise Community Partners and the American Heart Association, who's worked so hard and devoted time and expertise to this very, very important conversation.
Thank you, Michael. I would also like to thank all the organizations and the foundations who are a part of this initiative, who have given their time to assist. If you would go to the next slide. And some of these folks, you'll be hearing from them today during our breakout session, discussions, and other conversations. I would like to then turn it to David Bowers, who is the market leader, VP and market leader for the Mid-Atlantic office Community Partners, so that he can tell you a little bit more about Enterprise and the history of how we've gotten into the faith-based development.
Great. Many thanks, Brianna. Appreciate it. It's a blessing to be with everyone. If we can go to the next slide. Thanks so much. So I'm David Bowers, the market leader for the Mid-Atlantic region and cover Maryland, DC, and Virginia. So our faith-based development initiative started in the Mid-Atlantic region with Enterprise, and we had some strategic advisors who you see are listed out here, a local community-based nonprofit that was a collaboration between police and clergy, Georgetown University, over the years, Wesley Seminary, and the University of Baltimore as a current partner. So what do we do? As I mentioned, launched 15 years ago, and our goal is to get new units of affordable housing and community serving facilities developed. And we work with houses of worship who have undeveloped or underdeveloped land and want to help them make informed go or no-go decisions about development. And our approach is to connect the houses of worship to critical development, legal, and capital resources. And while the why may seem obvious, let me just say for us, we were in a very high cost market. But around the country, anywhere you are in the country, you generally will see that 20% of renters in this country pay more than half of their income for housing. In our region, we had nearly 10,000 homeless folks in the region of the nation's capital. And of course, there are economic and other disparities by ethnicity and geography. But there's also this potential. There have been studies done around the country about the amount of land that is owned by houses of worship. This data that you see on this slide is just one snapshot of land, vacant parcels owned in some jurisdictions, including the nation's capital and some surrounding jurisdictions, where you could get anywhere from 40 to 100,000 plus units of housing built on some of the land owned by underutilized land owned by houses of worship. So there is need in our land, but there's also potential that houses of worship hold to help meet that need. We can go to the next slide. So in terms of what we do, we provide our approach is to help make clergy and lay leadership comfortably conversant in the process. So we do regular trainings on aspects of the development process, visioning, nuts and bolts of development, how do you access public and private money, and the like. Again, to help folks be comfortable in having to interact with bankers, with developers, with real estate lawyers, and the like. We historically have provided some catalytic grant dollars that can help provide for market studies and feasibility analysis, so people can help make, again, an informed go or no go decision vis-a-vis your vision. Is there a need for that senior housing you want to build, or that family rental, or that grocery store? Is there a real demand in your marketplace? And we've done some recoverable early pre-development grants to help with some of the other early costs. And then, of course, access to a full range of enterprise products and services, while we also encourage folks, shop around, right, for your money, for your professionals who will be working with you. We can go to the next slide. We also provided technical assistance, organizational development assistance, zoning and market analysis, project-specific development TA, and many of our interactions will provide access to, through a bullpen of consultants that you see listed down here, TA that is specific to a project where a consultant is essentially acting as an owner's rep to help the house of worship as it's navigating the waters of selecting a development partner. And then legal services, access to real estate lawyers. We say if you're going to do a real estate development deal, make sure you have a real estate development lawyer who is representing just the house of worship. We can go to the next slide. So providing those range of services over the years, a quick snapshot of what we've been able to accomplish with God's grace and hard work of folks. Over 1,500 new units of housing have been produced, and a health clinic. Over 1,000 are in the pipeline. You see some of the information listed about dollars invested. We've hosted over 50 training sessions, 22 iron sharpens iron networking luncheons over the years, and are collaborating over the last 5 years, the University of Baltimore, with a certificate program that's a 6-month intensive deep dive that also provides deeper instruction. We can go to the next slide. So this gives us a snapshot of some of the milestones when we started, how we expanded into Baltimore. We hit 1,000 units in 2019, and now looking this day to day here in Detroit, it's just a blessing to be here as this model continues to be shared and tweaked and improved in different markets around the country. We can go to the next slide. So I want to share in the next couple slides, just in a couple quick minutes, a few learnings and insights we've had. So for houses of worship in particular, I want to share a few questions that have arisen that we encourage houses of worship to think about before developing. Do you have control of the land to develop your vision? And do you want to maintain that ownership and site control over the long term? Most houses of worship do. Some want to sell. There's no right or wrong answer per se, but you want to be clear on whether or not long-term ownership or control, 20 years, 50 years, 100 years down the road is important, because that will be an issue as you're working through certain types of transactions. Be clear on what your short and long-term economic goals are for the house of worship. Do you expect cash flow from the development? Are you willing to subsidize the project or just break even? Are you willing to contribute any portion of the land value? What type of housing or community facility, obviously, do you want to develop? Who's your targeted market? Do you have an economic empowerment interest or racial equity goals? In other words, besides just opening up a housing development, or do you want to create jobs for local community members as part of the development? Support minority-owned businesses. A lot of people get paid in a development, right? Lawyers, landscapers, title companies. There are a lot of people. Do you want to make sure that you're intentional about where that money goes? Do you, as the house of worship, expect to have an active role in the development? Do you have a separate entity for the development? Is there a development team and or main point of contact in place at the house of worship? Who makes the decision in the house? Are you a congregational polity or a connectional polity? Who has the ability to make decisions on behalf of the house? And making sure you have a real estate attorney. We can go to the next slide. So a few of the lessons learned that have flowed from this, that oftentimes unfamiliarity with the development process or fear of the unknown often leads to no action by the houses of worship. We've seen that. Extensive TA is oftentimes needed in capacity building for the nonprofit entities that sometimes are associated with the house of worship. And what I mean by that is oftentimes the house will say, yeah, we've got a nonprofit and we want it to be part of the development, but it's really a paper nonprofit. There's no paid staff. There's no functioning board. There are no audited financials, for example. So if you want that nonprofit to be a part of a multi-million-dollar development deal, but it's been run by volunteer, Sister Jones and Brother Johnson, that's great. And that's a blessing. But if you want them to be a part of a multi-million-dollar development deal, there's oftentimes capacity that'll need to be built. The connection to intellectual capital is critical, assisting with those go or no-go decisions. We mentioned the piece about making sure the house of worship has its own lawyer, the lawyer that represents just the house, not your development partner who will bring it in and say, hey, we're going to partner. We're your development partner. We've got a lawyer. That's great. But we have heard time and time again, houses of worship saying, we wish we had our own real estate lawyer who just represented our interests. We know that timelines are different for the faith community and developers. Developers think on a quarterly timeline. Houses of worship's frame of reference is eternity. So oftentimes we got to speed up the house of worship and slow down the developers. Building trust is critical. Some financial issues to deal with, guarantees and who gets paid what, when. Being clear about what's in it for me, and the clergy leader casting the vision, gaining buy-in from membership, but delegating oftentimes that day-to-day management, delegating authority, but not the responsibility while they handle the stewardship of the house. Next slide. So there was one thing I just wanted to mention as I transition is simply that for the American Heart Association, we are really excited about this collaboration with the American Heart Association for the Faith-Based Development Initiative, how things have evolved over time. We are now working with AHA in 5 markets around the country, including this event today in Detroit. The Kresge Foundation provided support to American Heart Association, who has provided Selected Enterprise to be its housing kind of partner in this. So we're excited about the ability to engage in cities around the country with, again, some of this training, some grant dollars for a selected entity that will help with some of their market study. And we hope that it lays the groundwork for really building the effort in Detroit and in cities around the country that includes New Orleans and Washington, D.C. We've got what's going on in Detroit and Denver and other places around the country. So you are literally part of a national movement. I want to thank our partners at AHA for the collaboration. So God bless you all and what you will hear and learn for the rest of the day. And it's been a pleasure and an honor to be with you. Take care.
Thank you, David, for that very, very informative introduction. So at this point,
Mike, can I have 1 second while
Sure,
we get but we fixed the screen. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. I'm Melinda Clemens, and I am the Vice President and Market Leader for Enterprise Community Partners, our Detroit office. We are so excited to have you here today with us, and hopefully joining us again tomorrow afternoon to wrap up this webinar. Before we get started, we had great opening prayers and discussion. I would just invite everyone to please put your name, your organization, and one thing that you are thankful for on this beautiful morning today as we go through the program, so we can meet each other. We're also monitoring chat. So if you have any questions, please also put them in chat. And with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Mike.
Thank you, Melinda. So yeah, at this point, we're going to play a video for you all. We discussed a lot of different nuances and challenges when it comes to developing affordable housing, but what better than a story? And this is Isabella's story. She's a fellow Detroiter, and she just really has a remarkable story about her upbringing in the city and the challenges that her community faces. So I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen and play Isabella's story. Can everybody see? All right.
Yes.
I've been living in this community for 64 and a half years. It's very depressing when you walk through the neighborhood and look at the way it is and the way it used to be. To get the basic necessities, you can't get it in this neighborhood. When I was little, living here, we had trees all up and down the street. I had houses on every corner. We had a diverse neighborhood. You would go up on Gratiot, you could get anything you wanted. Mom would send us to the store just about every day, and you really had no fear. It was just normal. Used to be a garden right there, and this is where the cherry tree was, where my dad would shake the tree every year and shake all the cherries down, and the neighborhood children would come and get the cherries. I feel that my health is being impacted by not being able to get fresh foods and vegetables. When you go to the store, they have a lot of canned foods, but it's full of sodium. To get things at a reasonable price, I have to go way out into the suburbs of Metro Detroit. It's easier for me to go to a fast food and get food than it is for me to go to a large grocery store chain. And I have health problems where I really can't drive anymore. I have to call my sister, I call my daughter, I call my granddaughter, and my cousin come.
I went to the bakery, so I brought you some raisin bread from the bakery in my neighborhood.
Oh, thank you.
And I have a little bit of some
Grandma
pot
loves
roast. Grandma loves it.
Okay.
And that's a pot roast for dinner later on.
How much you pay for these baked beans?
Oh, they were on sale for $1.12. It was 10 for 10.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. Okay, good. Because see, around here, a can like this would be like almost $3.
That's too much. It disappoints me to know that because she has a disability and she doesn't drive, that she can't get the things that she needs in her own community. It shouldn't be based on your income or your zip code.
We've come to realize that where you live and the conditions in which you live matter. Social determinants of health, social factors are the way we describe those non-clinical factors that have a huge effect on people's health. We cannot get to better cardiovascular health until and unless we think about care and we think about behavior and we think about social factors.
I would like to see houses in this neighborhood again. I would like to every day, a couple of times a day, go out and just walk. In my community, I'm going to be truthful, I really don't feel safe. I would like to see a police car patrolling, the neighborhood. I would like to see grocery stores, a recreation center for your health. It's really sad. It gets to be depressing at times.
If you start with affordable housing, the ripple then is, are there supermarkets near that affordable housing? Are there parks near that affordable housing? Are there good schools near that affordable housing? All of which can affect one's ability to be as healthy as one can, or to treat one's diseases like high blood pressure and cholesterol as well as one might be able to.
So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our Executive Director, Christian Hurley of the American Heart Association of Southeastern Michigan, to talk about the correlation and connection between housing and health. So Christian, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Great. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you to Michael for hosting. Thank you to our partners at Enterprise, community partners, as well as all of our faith leaders who are joining us today. As Michael said, I'm Christian Hurley. I'm the Executive Director here at the American Heart Association of Southeastern Michigan. And I just want to highlight a few things around, why AHA is partnering in this way, and why the focus, right, on housing, and how do we see that as sort of a means to an end of achieving our mission to be a relentless force for a world of longer and healthier lives. We really approach this mission through working to be a catalyst to achieving maximum impact and equitable health and well-being. We do this through building powerful partnerships that can bring attention and resources to these critical factors that we call the social determinants of health that really do make up our ability to become healthy and sustain healthy living. We know that approximately 50 million people in the United States are at higher risk for cardiovascular disease because they lack the most basic needs, including access to healthy food, clean air and drinking water, as well as housing. Only 20%, about 20% of our health is impacted by the quality of and access to clinical care. And so as you can see on this slide, there are a myriad of factors, right, that significantly impact your care beyond whether or not you have access to a physician. So we see here on this slide that 20%, as I said, is around that access and quality of your care, but 30%, of course, involves your health behaviors, the fact whether or not you're a smoker, or you're getting enough physical activity and, eating a healthy diet, or, maybe whether you're using alcohol or drug use. These things that we do on a daily basis that make up our health behaviors only reflect our health 30%. Our physical environment, the air that we breathe, the quality of the water that we drink, and our access to quality housing and transit make up 10% of our ability to be healthy. Social and economic factors make up 40% of our ability to remain healthy. So our access to quality education, employment, equitable income, our family and social support, and of course that community safety that Isabella talked about in the video that we just saw. These things, we call them the social determinants or social influencers of health. And these factors, again, largely affect whether or not a person can live a healthy life. And it also can determine how long we live, which is very much a challenge here in our community. For far too long, these factors have disproportionately affected the poorest pockets of our society, creating significant health inequities. Next slide. So today our focus is particularly on housing. Where we live, as we talked about in that video, can have a huge impact on how long we're going to live. Right here in the Metro Detroit area, folks who are living sort of near Harper Woods have a life expectancy of about 77. Whereas if you drive just a few miles away to Grosse Pointe, the Grosse Pointe area, your life expectancy jumps to about 82 years. That's 5 years of life difference just in a few miles. And we've seen discrepancies in life expectancy in our community, actually up to 16 years. So it's a critical issue. Stable housing is so critical to sustainable health. Living in unstable housing environments can have a devastating impact on health. For example, people who are experiencing homelessness have a decreased life expectancy and an increased risk of premature death. Black and Hispanic households are almost twice as likely as white households to lack housing security, due in part to structural racism that has restricted the lives of people of color throughout history. The American Heart Association is working to address these drivers of health disparities, including the social determinants that we're discussing, such as housing. We know that focusing in this area is the only way that we're truly going to achieve equitable health and well-being for all. Next slide, Michael. So for these reasons, this is why, the American Heart Association is so proud and excited to be a part of this initiative, to be able to have this impact in Detroit and focus in on housing in partnership with Enterprise. As it was mentioned before, we're only one of 5 markets chosen nationally for this initiative, which we're very proud of. We see this as a continuation of our partnership with Enterprise to really be able to sort of take the strengths of both organizations and elevate this issue and bring critical resources and technical support to our faith partners. We're really building on today a legacy of faith-based partnerships. One of the things that AHA really feels that we're strong at is convening powerful partners. And we have spent decades building relationship with all of you in our faith community. And so we really see this as an opportunity to build out of some of that work that we've been doing around health, particularly, and really focusing in a new area to create greater impact. So with all of that, I'll pass it back over to Michael, and just thank you so much again for joining us. And we're very pleased to be a part of this initiative. So thank you.
Thank you, Christian. And I'll actually turn it over to Brianna to give us a little backdrop of this video we're going to watch.
Yes, thank you, Michael. So we are getting ready to watch a short video of Jim Rouse, who's the founder of Enterprise Community Partners. It ties directly to the history of our organization to have a faith-based lens at how we look at affordability. And so we want people to know a little bit more about Enterprise and how we got into this space from the very beginning.
Give me one moment.
Me while I was still running the Rouse Company, that it's likely to be black or white.
What is the Enterprise Foundation? What does it do?
The Enterprise Foundation was created 10 years ago by my wife and me while I was still running the Rouse Company. And we were drawn into that by a little church in Washington with which we were both familiar and had worked. Never members of it, but and these 2 women came to me and said, we want to do something about housing the poor. And will you come over and meet with a small group of us in the Church of the Savior, which is the name of this little church? And I said I would. I went over and met with them, and the summation of my advice in that meeting was that there's nothing you can do about it. You're too little. You haven't got the troops. You haven't got the money. It takes a big program. This is a big problem. You can't go at it in little pieces. You've got to go at it in a big way. That was in accordance with the conventional wisdom of that day. But happily, those two young women ignored that wisdom and went out to do something about housing the poor. They came back in about 6 months and they said, "We've got it." And I said, "What have you got?" They said, "We want you to see it." And I went to these two ghastly buildings called the Ritz and the Mozart, which had by their names once been middle and upper class housing. Whole area had gone through the transition from white to black, almost 100% black occupancy, had been neglected by the owners. Rents went down, maintenance went down, elevators didn't work, no doors on the street, mailboxes ripped out of the wall. The stench was so great when I went in. I could not have gone beyond the lobby. The garbage and trash had all been thrown down the elevator shafts as a result of both anger and inconvenience. And that's what they wanted to do. They wanted to buy that building, two buildings. That was the Ritz, one was the Mozart, and make them into good housing for the people who lived there. So we financed the purchase of those buildings, added.
Who's the we? At this point, is it the foundation
No,
or is it the Rouse Company?
no, this is
Yourself?
me and my wife. It was me at that time. It was I. And we borrowed the money to lend them to buy the buildings and to have another $125,000 for electricians and plumbers and specialists. And 3 years later, with 50,000 hours of volunteer work, those buildings were very, very good places to live. Not just okay. They were excellent places to live. Stench was gone. Neat, clean, mailboxes worked, doors on the front, fine lobby. And my wife and I went on the board in its early days, back in 1974, still on the board. And we saw these remarkable things that these people were doing. Two young men wanted jobs. They helped them get jobs. They then formed Jubilee Jobs to set up an organization to help people off the street, marginal people, be able to get jobs. They've placed 5,000 people in jobs. A woman came along who was concerned with health care, set up a clinic called the Columbia Road Clinic, brought in thousands of people off the street. Now, last year they treated 16,000 people off the streets. Then they wanted an infirmary where they could have beds for people off the street. Got the money from a woman from Chicago who put up $2.5 million. And now they bring in damaged, ill, sick, homeless people, and they're put to bed and they're healed and put back on the street. But then being put back on the street, everybody wrenched their hands about that happened.
All right, so I think we all got the message. I'll turn it back over to Brianna to introduce Melinda for our reality check this morning.
Thank you, Michael. So I would like to personally go ahead and introduce my boss, which is Melinda Clemens. She is the Detroit VP and Market Leader for Enterprise Community Partners. And she'll be talking to you guys today about reality checks and common challenges with doing development. Thanks.
Thanks, Brianna. And thank you again, everyone, for joining. And just to clarify, I am not Brianna's boss. I am her teammate. And so we all are a team to get our work done in Detroit. As we saw from Jim Rouse's video, we're an affordable housing organization. We really began in the faith-based community with working with church members to create affordable housing. You know, housing is a fundamental human need, and it really lays the foundation for any successful life that you're going to have. As Christian said, your zip code really does matter. And so how do we create safe, affordable housing for folks, but also in areas where they have opportunities to advance and thrive? And our main focus of that work is through affordable housing. At At Enterprise, we have 11 offices nationwide. Detroit was opened the latest, and we opened in 2016, and we officially became a market office in 2019. In Detroit, we really focus on a few key areas. We focus on preservation of affordable housing, whether it's regulated or whether it's naturally occurring affordable housing. We know that there are national wait lists for affordable housing, and how do we preserve what we currently have while trying to create additional affordable housing? We also focus on working with our nonprofit community development organizations. How do we, and we have a lot of partners on the line now, thank you for joining us. How do we assist them in executing their mission in the neighborhoods, which also includes affordable housing? And we have finally, our economic mobility work. So how do we work with anchor institutions where we help them partner with local CDCs to advance development in their communities? And so we pull all of that together to really deliver our Detroit program. Nationwide, we really have 3 legs to our stool. The first leg is capital. So we provide loans. We have community development facilities. So those would be things like grocery stores or schools. We also have a division that syndicates low-income housing tax credits. So that would be our syndicating group, which is Enterprise Investments. And then we have a mortgage company that provides HUD 221D, Freddie, and Fannie loans. That's our capital side of the house, so we can advance our programmatic work that I just discussed. And then also we advance for state and local policies. So we bring all that together to really lay the foundation for our affordable housing work. Can we go back 1 slide, please? And so before I joined Enterprise, I was a real estate lender for my career. And I have seen it all. There is nothing that I have not seen in the real estate development field. Particularly, I worked for, and you guys may have heard of this organization, Shore Bank, which was a minority institution out of the south side of Chicago. And they actually had a location in Detroit. And so I worked with a lot of faith-based organizations during a difficult time in the city and in the country in 2008. And so I am familiar with the challenges that faith-based organizations face because, typically faith-based organizations really don't have the millions of dollars that some of our other organizations and competitors have to put into our projects. So we're here today, as we discussed when we opened, to talk about how we can overcome those problems and challenges, and really how do we capitalize on the resources that our houses of worship have in Southeast Michigan. So I'll just start off and say, you have to have a strong will to do real estate development. It is very difficult. Everyone wants to be a real estate developer. And there are many challenges. You have to believe that your project is going to compensate you for your time and your labor, and it will generate enough cash flow to be able to cover the expenses associated with the project. If you are getting into this field for the first time, you really need a strong team around you. And whether you're doing it actually for the first time or you're doing it for the 100th time, your team really does matter. You need a strong general contractor. You need a strong architect, accountant, subs, their real estate and finance team. There are a lot of different folks that can really help your project be successful. Again, even with a strong team, it can be difficult because margins are slim. And so typically people think that real estate returns on average long-term about a 10% return. That is if everything goes right. It could be a longer time horizon before you actually are able to realize that 10% return. Here in Michigan, we have a lot of things that we have to overcome. Number one is we have a shortage of skilled trades. And so particularly if we want to work with BIPOC tradesmen and tradeswomen, we really have to spend even more resources trying to weed those people, to figure out who those individuals are to work on our projects. Also, it's very competitive. Typically, we see organizations and finance institutions interested in sort of those larger, sexy projects. Luckily, we have our community bank organizations and also our community development financial institutions that can assist us with overcoming some of those traditional financing obstacles that we would face when we're working with banks. Thank you, Brianna. BIPOC is Black, Indigenous, people of color. And I would say we need to really think about the long term. Investment in real estate, particularly in the Metro Detroit area, is a long-term game. I ask real estate developers all the time, how come they're doing this? And usually it is for one of two reasons. They're doing it because they really are passionate about their communities and they want to see people housed and helped in the communities they serve, or they want to leave a legacy for their children or their constituents. And so we're thinking of this is not a get rich quick project. This is a long time horizon project as you're thinking about your real estate development career. Next, please. So the biggest challenge is gaps in the capital stack or gaps in how the project is going to be financed. It's all about the gap. I used to say that all the time. Also, I frequently have said deals are put together with duct tape and super glue. These are really, really hard deals. You find yourself a lot of times going to multiple different institutions trying to figure out how you are going to fill the gap in the projects, how you're going to be able to get that cost down so that you can actually start developing the projects. And it usually takes multiple forms of capital. You may have a first mortgage on your project for a construction loan, a second mortgage on your project, and some type of subsidy or grant dollars to help the project meet its capital needs in addition to your equity. In my career, I have only worked on one project that has not had cost overruns or that has completed on time, and that was the same project. And you can be the best developer in the world. There are things that happen that are outside of your control that can delay your project. And we're going to hear from some of our partners about their experience when they were completing their real estate projects and give you a firsthand look at some of the challenges and wins that they had doing their projects in the Detroit area. Speaking of Detroit, we are in an automotive industry segment of the state. And so environmental contamination is a problem that is frequently experienced. There are underground storage tanks that we see a lot. Typically, this requires a lot of remediation and additional costs to your project that you may not have expected. And then another challenge, and finally, are delays with permitting. And so getting the necessary permits can be a challenge. We'll also have panelists from the city of Detroit during these two-day process, and they can talk more about permitting and things that you may be able to do to streamline that process. I hope everyone on this call wants to do affordable housing, and we have not discouraged you from doing that. If anything, we want to encourage you, but we definitely want to make sure that we did upfront point out the challenges associated with real estate in Southeast Michigan. And so with that, I will turn it back over to Michael and we will continue on. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Melinda, for that very helpful reality check. And I'm pretty sure that everyone is still very excited about their project, and now they're ready to move forward with that great information. So Melinda, thank you so much for that. So at this point, we're gonna have Amy Schott-Manzi from the American Heart Association talk a little bit about advocacy in housing. So Amy, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Michael. I appreciate it. And good morning, everyone. I am so honored to be with you. I had said in the chat, I'm grateful to be amongst folks who have a heart for service, my favorite kind of people. And so I'm just really delighted to be here this morning and to talk to you a little bit about advocacy. If we hop to the next slide, please. I'm going to start with just sort of defining advocacy. I think it's often helpful and important to start with a common set of definitions, and we hear that word in a lot of different places and a lot of different ways. So I wanted to talk just a little bit about how we're defining it as we go into the presentation. Advocacy is often defined as sort of speaking on behalf of people, taking action on behalf of people, and often they don't know that we are doing that we are advocating on their behalf. Also, it's the act or the process of supporting a cause or a proposal. I think we often use it in this regard. And we think about this as sort of the asking nicely piece where we say, here's what we'd like to have happen. Maybe we call an elected official or a decision maker and say, I support this particular issue. And I'd like you to support it as well. And then this third piece, what we often talk about at the Heart Association, is this application of pressure on people and institutions. So our elected officials, our government institutions, our governing bodies, who can give us what we want, who can help us achieve our goals. And that is sort of the foundation, the premise of what we're going to talk about today, how we can be a resource to our elected officials, how we can apply the pressure and tell them the stories and help move them to helping us achieve our goals. If we move to the next slide, why should we think about advocacy as a part of our housing initiative, as a part of our development of affordable housing? And this helps illustrate why. This is data from the Congressional Management Foundation. They talk to elected officials and think about citizen advocacy and how it has an influence. And so the question that was asked here is, if your member or senator, this one was sort of focused on congressional activity, but we know that it translates state and local governments as well and elected officials. If your member or senator has not already arrived at a firm decision on an issue, how much influence might the following advocacy strategies have on their decision? And so they asked a series of things, but among them, I think there's often an idea that, you know, this is work that has to be done by a paid lobbyist, right? Somebody who works from a K Street office in Washington. And you'll see that a visit from a lobbyist ranked fairly low on the amount of influence it had on an elected official's decision. Rather, it was in-person visits from their constituents, from the citizens who live in their community, that had a lot of influence on their decision making. And so that's what we're talking about. How do we equip and empower the citizens of our communities to tell their story, to raise their voice, to make a difference, and to communicate with elected officials and with our governing bodies about what's so important to us, in this case, affordable housing. And I think this helps illustrate and tells us this is the stuff, this citizen advocacy, this is what helps make a difference. Let's go to the next slide. So what does advocacy look like as we're trying to create change and influence public policy that helps achieve our goals? Meetings are without a doubt the most effective when we can be face-to-face with somebody, sharing our story, talking about the issues. It is the most effective way to help persuade someone. Those look different right now. We'd all love to be in person with one another. I wish we could be and enjoy the fellowship that comes with that in-person activity. But right now it's happening a lot like this, meetings with elected officials, whether it's joining a city council meeting or scheduling a one-on-one conversation with your city councilman or your state representative. those are happening like this virtually, and they're becoming accustomed to that. We're seeing a lot of success. Elected officials are taking more time sometimes in these environments than when they're in person and rushing. So not all hope is lost when we can't be in person, but there are lots of other tactics and ways we can engage our elected officials and our governing bodies as well. And so you'll see a few of those here. Through the media, it's a really important and impactful way to help drive the public dialogue, to build support for our issues. Phone calls can be really effective, inviting and equipping folks in your community to call their elected officials and ask for a particular action. Social media is incredibly powerful. When we tag an elected official in our posts, it takes only a few of those to get their office paying attention and responding. So it can be really impactful. Emails, certainly sending through our information to the offices. Like all of us, email boxes are cluttered. It's perhaps harder to make an impact in that way, but that doesn't mean it's not still an effective communication tool. Acting online, utilizing systems and infrastructure that are in place. I'll talk in a little bit about what we have here at the Heart Association, but there is certainly an ability to send messages through some of the tools and things online that help connect you to your elected officials. And so there are all these different ways to engage, to tell our story, to impact elected officials and their decisions. And so I'm going to jump into talking about how and where we get started with that. We can go to the next slide. So first and foremost is identifying where public policy, where those elected officials, those governing bodies, the public policy that they're setting can help achieve our goals and priorities. So folks have talked a bit about your goals. Mr. Bowers talked earlier about the questions you might ask yourself, the goals that you have as a part of your project, and then taking that to the next step and saying, how can public policy, how can my elected officials help achieve those goals of providing affordable housing for everybody? For example, at the Heart Association, we believe government officials have a role to play in creating healthier communities through housing policy. And in just a couple of ways, our federal lawmakers can and should act to end discriminatory home loan lending practices. They should ensure that those who live in federally subsidized housing live in safe and healthy conditions. But it is those state and local bodies, those state and local officials who have the greatest power to enact change in the design of our local communities. And so those folks should and can invest in local housing developments that promote equitable communities and healthy neighborhoods. And so those are the ways that we know those elected officials can help us achieve our goals. Next, once you sort of identify what the right public policy is to help achieve your goal, identifying the resources that already exist. You're hearing lots of great resources throughout this webinar, things from your local enterprise partners, and identify groups doing this work. We are often stronger in coalition when we work with partners. So coming together with the folks working already on affordable housing, gathering up the lessons they've learned in their projects. I know that built into this webinar are some case studies and hearing from others who've done this work. Don't feel like you have to operate on your own. Don't feel like you are out there reinventing everything. There are folks who are just so well equipped to share their experiences with you. So find the folks who are already doing this work and partner up. And then rally your community, start to talk about the project, about the goal, get folks excited, have folks sign up to join your effort, equip them with the talking points and the stories to tell, to raise public support for your project, and to equip and empower folks to be ready to talk to our elected officials. And that moves right to the next part, which is just taking these advocates, these folks who've expressed enthusiasm, who are going to be impacted by our project perhaps, and educating them about the way public policy can help achieve our goals, and training them to tell their story, talk to their elected officials. So those are some basic steps we can take to get started. If we go to the next slide, we want to build relationships. So let me stop and say just for a second, just COVID realities, we're all still working through a pandemic. Government budgets are incredibly tight all over the place, and priorities thus far have been somewhat dictated by our environment, by tackling the pandemic that we're all experiencing. That does not mean this is the time to give up. Folks have mentioned before, and I will reiterate, right now, the need is greater than ever for so many folks. And so building relationships with elected officials, even if they say the money isn't there right now, this project has to wait, we can begin by building relationships with elected officials in advance of our ask of them. And so helping them get to know your community, scheduling meetings, telling the stories, inviting them to join you, members of your congregation, members of the community, to experience the problem that we're trying to solve, and helping establish yourself as a credible resource for information and for connections in the community. Those are so valuable as elected officials are faced with decisions about all sorts of things, including where funding should go, as they're faced with a zoning question. If they know that we're a resource, if we've helped them build connections in the community where they can turn and ask for advice, for knowledge about how a particular piece of legislation would affect the community, then you have created a really valuable relationship with that elected official. All of that makes it easier when we go to them with an ask. And tell them the vital stories of community members that you want them to remember. We know this, that when an elected official goes to vote in a city council meeting or in the legislature, it is not the facts and figures necessarily that we've put in front of them, but it is the story of an individual that sways them to vote one way or another. It is the stories of folks in their communities. It's how we move people. It's how we persuade people. And so those stories become so very, very important. You all heard Isabella's story earlier, helping to tell those stories of the members of your community, elected officials, in advance of the time that we're asking them to vote or to do a particular thing for us. So begin now building those relationships with the elected officials who may be valuable in your project. We can move to the next slide. I'm sensitive to time here, but just a couple of notes on how important this storytelling piece is. This particular cognitive psychologist talked about the idea that a fact, when you wrap it in a story, is 22 times more memorable. So that means that we can deliver facts and figures all day, but when we say a % of the population is affected by this problem, and here is Isabella to illustrate that, then that all becomes tied up together, the story and that fact that you delivered, and it becomes far more memorable because that's how we connect with one another. And so I won't spend a lot of time, if you go to the next slide, I won't dive into all of these pieces of stories, but I will say that we rely very heavily at the Heart Association on storytelling to help put a face on all the facts and figures that we're developing, to help connect lawmakers to their constituents and to those stories. And that human interest side, that story piece of an issue, helps in a variety of ways. It helps get media attention and build public support for a project. It also helps bring other supportive advocates and partners to the table when they hear those stories. So I can't stress enough how important they are. Let's go to the next slide. At the Heart Association, we can keep going. We have lots of training on stories. We'd be really delighted to help you build those stories and talk with your communities about developing those stories. So don't hesitate to reach out. Just for a quick second, our grassroots program at the Heart Association is called You're the Cure. It's across the country, a few 100,000 advocates working to create community change. We'd love to have you be a part of it. We'd love to continue to offer advocate training and resources and things. If you'd like to join, you can just pull out your mobile device. I suspect it's nearby, and you can text the word Detroit to 46839, or you can visit us at you'rethecure.org to learn a little bit more about the advocacy at the Heart Association. And on the next slide, I believe there's contact information, both for me and for your local advocacy staff of the Heart Association. And we'd all be happy to support you, provide advocacy training, help equip your advocates. So don't hesitate to reach out. if we can be of service to you in your project. And otherwise, I look forward to continuing the conversation over the rest of today and tomorrow, and I so appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Amy. And the most incredible thing about doing affordable housing is you automatically become an advocate. So, and I know another question is probably brewing right now. Are these slides are going to be made available? Absolutely. So we will definitely make these available to all the participants on the follow-up. So thank you so much, Amy. And remember, those stories, that's what counts. So thank you so much, Amy, for that spotlight. So we're gonna have a break here in a minute, but before we do, I'm gonna invite Brianna to come back and go over our assessment that we had sent out to all of the participants before registration. So Brianna, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Michael. So, and while Michael's pulling that up, I just wanted to say that Amy is totally right about the storytelling piece. If you look back at the video we showed you of Jim Rouse, if those faith leaders did not come ready and prepared with their story and advocating for what those folks needed in that community, we wouldn't have Enterprise Community Partners today, right? And so it's very important to think about that piece as you go forward and you're, building those connections so that you can get your project done, whether it's with the city, whether it's with another individual that you would like to partner with, making sure people are on the same page about what you are trying to accomplish in your community. With that being said, a lot of this has to come with thought, right? You have to think about how your organization aligns with this purpose to fulfill this affordable housing need in your community. You have to think about how you might want to partner with others, and then also any resources and helpful information that you might need to pull together prior to starting your development project. So with that being said, we have an assessment, a faith-based development assessment that was given out as a part of registering for the event. We would like you guys to complete that. It's a 45 question assessment. It covers everything from visioning to thinking about who you want to partner with and things of that nature. You're not going to have answers to all 45 questions. Just, everybody's in a different phase of their development journey. But if you're able to, fill it out as best as possible with most of the questions, you'll be able to put yourself in a position where when you know that you're at a certain phase in your process, you can then go talk to the city, or you can then go talk to that financial lender and say, hey, this is where we are, and this is what we have and who we're partnering with, and we just need X amount of money to fill our gap. So with that being said, we would love for everyone to fill this out. We will be collecting them. We would like them back, and we'll provide you information to send it in. But we would like that back to us on April 14th. And we will be looking over those and seeing if there's ways that Enterprise and the American Heart Association can be an assistance to you through that process. And then from there, I would just say that we are going to go ahead into a 15-minute break really quickly, and then we're going to get started with the panel discussion. So just leave your screen up. We'll be back in a moment to start the second half of our workshop series today. Thank you. Thank you guys for coming back after the break. We had a great and jam-packed first half of our workshop series today. And now we're about to get ready to go into panel discussions. Before we get started, we want to go ahead and introduce Orlando Bailey, our facilitator for our panel discussion with the City of Detroit and the Detroit Land Bank. A lifelong Detroiter, Orlando P. Bailey learned how to practice community development in the neighborhood where he was born. Passionate about shifting the narrative of Black cities and neighborhoods, Bailey is Director of Engagement for Bridge Detroit, co-host of the podcast Authentically Detroit, and host of Urban Consulate. Previously, he served as Chief Development Officer for the East Community Network. A sought-after voice for public dialogues and media, Bailey has appeared on stages and screens for the Aspen Institute, SXSW, Canadian Urban Institute, Wellbeing Cities Forum, American Black Journal on Detroit Public Television, and more. In 2019, Bailey traveled across Europe with the German Marshall Fund of the United States. In 2020, he was named a BM Vanguard Fellow. In 2015, he was selected as an Emerging City Champion by Knight Foundation in 880 cities in Toronto. In 2010, Bailey was the recipient of the Martin Luther King Humanitarian Award from Eastern Michigan University, where he received his bachelor's degree in broadcast journalism. Since then, Bailey has had the privilege to interview hundreds of visionaries and change makers, including Dr. Cornel West, Reverend Dr. William J. Barber II, Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, Lieutenant Governor Garland Gilchrist, U.S. Attorney Barbara McQuaid, Dr. Andre M. Perry, and more. Rooted in his faith and radical love for his community, Bailey is a passionate advocate for city residents as experts in their lived experience. He continues to reside on Detroit's East Side. I turn it over to Orlando Bailey.
Wow, thank you, Brianna. I was not expecting the bio to be read. You know, it's so funny when people read your bio and then you got to sit there and listen to it like you don't know what's there. It's like, it's the most awkward piece of a program ever. I absolutely, it makes my skin crawl. Listen, I thank you all so much for being with us. Thanks to Melinda and Brianna at Enterprise Partners, to our MC Michael, who's doing a great job, and Christian at AMA. Thank you all so much for inviting me to facilitate this amazing discussion. I see some of my partners in crime in the building. What up, though? Marilyn Horn and Janine Hatcher. I see Phyllis Edwards. Some of the OGs are in the building. I thought I saw Linda Smith, my friend Jason Politier, Reverend Joan Ross. We see you. What up, though, Detroit? And I know we're in a room full of faith leaders, so I'll say, let the church say amen. Let the church say amen. I'm still a church boy at heart. I'm so happy to see everybody. Listen, we have 3 guests. I get to talk to the city today. I get to talk to the city, and everybody's always talking about the city and what the city does and what the city don't do. Well, I am happy to facilitate a more practical discussion. Most of the conversations that I facilitate are really high up in philosophical, and we use a lot of intelligentsia to get our points across. This is going to be a practical how-to discussion with the city of Detroit. So I am happy to welcome Jason Friedman, who is the development director of the East Region, City of Detroit, and Julio Sedano, he's the lead planner in planning development and the planning department and development, and Carla Marshall from the Detroit Land Bank Authority, Donald Rencher, who is the group executive for the mayor's offices of housing and planning and urban revitalization. Sends his regrets, he is not able to join us, but we're going to go ahead with Jason, Julio, and Carla. Welcome, everybody. Thank you. Thank you. Listen, a couple of housekeeping rules. I'm going to ask everybody, I want to ask everyone now to, if you have questions, to go ahead and put them in the chat. I'm going to ask Brianna and Michael to help me out just a little bit and interrupt really toward the end with those questions. I am Zooming from my cell phone because Comcast has an internet outage, and so I won't be able to see the chat in real time. But beyond that, I'm going to ask everyone to go ahead and put your questions and or comments in the chat because we got the city on the line, y'all. The city is here. Jason, how you doing?
Good morning. Great to see you, Orlando, and thank you so much for the opportunity to be here.
It's good to see you too. It's been a long time. It's been a long time. I want to start with you and really just ask, a broad question that I would like all the city representatives to answer within their sphere of influence. How does the city of Detroit, city government, support faith-based organizations in their housing development efforts? Just from your vantage point and from the work that you do, what does that support look like?
Sure, that's a great question. And coming from my perspective, I'm coming from the Housing and Revitalization Department, and I'm in the Public-Private Partnership Division. And you mentioned my title, I'm the Development Director for the East Side, but really what we do is try to create partnerships to help faith-based groups get projects done and improve the communities surrounding their influence and where they're located. A lot of this is place-based, but then there's a lot of expansion really out into the neighborhoods as well. So we do a lot of things, and it's everything from connecting groups to resources, and that can be anything from the programs that are available for the Detroit Housing for the Futures Fund to actually acquiring property and assembling property. One of the big things that we help people with is navigating through the development process. We spend a lot of time helping groups do public engagement. It's one of the most important things that we do is making sure that the development that we're doing in the neighborhoods is coming from the ideas of the residents and the groups that are already there. And then we have some specific things like funding that we have available that we help put into projects as well ourselves. And a lot of the funding that comes from the city is in the form of gap financing. You heard Melinda earlier talk a lot about
the gap.
The gap, all about the gap. And so really we have community development block grant funds and home partnership funds that come from the federal government that we invest in projects to make those things happen. But really, one of the things I really want to point out is, you know, we work with a huge range of people, and, you know, it's developers that are starting off on their first house or their first duplex, or, you know, a real small corner or a storefront church, up to the biggest congregations in the city. And, you know, we want to take the time to help everybody. So do not hesitate to reach out to us and see what we can do to work together with you.
Thank you, Jason. Carla Marshall, I want to bring you in on here from your vantage point at the Detroit Land Bank Authority. I know that we have the biggest land bank in the nation. How does the DLBA, that piece of the city, support faith-based organizations in their housing development efforts?
Okay, thank you, Orlando. So we support our faith-based organizations through our Community Partners program. Through a community partnership, we allow our CP, our community partners, or CPs as we call them, to purchase land from us at a discount. We allow them to purchase auction and own and now homes for a 20% discount. And we also allow them to endorse their members or community members and residents to give them an additional 20% discount on their purchases. We allow them to purchase through our direct projects program, and we help with land assemblage, and they also get a discount for those purchases as well. We also allow them access to our occupied nonprofit program, where the homes that are owned by the DLBA but are occupied by residents, we allow the community partners to come in, help fix up the home, put the applicants on their rent rolls, or to allow them to facilitate purchases by those owner occupants.
Wow. That you said a whole lot, Carla, and I want to dig into it, and I want to dig into some of what Jason said too, especially when we talk about that gap financing. But I'll come back around to you. I want to bring in Julio, who's the leader planner for the Planning and Development Department. Julio, from the Planning and Development Office, how does planning support faith-based organizations in their housing development efforts? Are you with us, Julio?
Sorry, I was muted, everybody. So we at the Planning and Development Department, we deal with design review and work with other departments such as HRD at the Land Bank and the EGC to provide design support in terms of review for developers and any type of organization. So we also work with BC to provide support in terms of zoning, any zoning questions related to any developments, and through our PPR, which is our preliminary plan review, which is a free meeting that anyone who is looking to build within the city can sign up for, which is where we bring all the departments, including water, and fire department and all the other ones that are important to development. And that meeting allows the organizations or developers who are interested in building in the city to ask questions related to their developments. And PDD is part of that initial meeting. And then we follow up with developers and make sure that, as a department, we like to push design excellence. So we make sure that we provide proper feedback on those projects to be able to meet that design excellence through their developments.
All right, thank you, Julio. Carla, I want to come to you because I think one of the first steps in development period, particularly housing development, is land acquisition and site control. And you spoke a little bit about the Community Partners Program, really, in a really practical step-by-step way. How does that work? What are the requirements on part of an organization to become a community partner? What do those steps look like? Is this a simplified process? Is it a bit laborious? Tell us more.
To actually become a community partner, the process is pretty simple. You apply on our website, buildingdetroit.org, under the programs tab. Once you get an application, we just need you to verify that you have a City of Detroit address for your organization. We verify that your organization has a tax exempt status. We also verify that the articles of incorporation with the state of Michigan are up to date and registered. We also make sure that you do not owe any back taxes to the city of
All
Detroit.
right, so wait, hold on. Let me pause right there because you said something that was like very, very important. The articles of incorporation have to be updated on the state of Michigan's website, and you have to have federal 501c3 tax exempt status.
Yeah, well, not 501c3. There are a number of tax exempt statuses that you can have, but you have to have a tax exempt status.
Okay, keep going.
Yes, we verify that you do not have any outstanding taxes with the city of Detroit and that you do not have any blight tickets. The final step is getting a letter of endorsement from either your Department of Neighborhoods representative or your city council person. We just want to make sure that the Department of Neighborhoods representative is aware of the development going on in their area, that you are a good actor in the community, and that they support any projects that you may do.
Cool. You know what, Carla, the streets be talking. And so I can hear the streets talking, and I got a question about that taxes piece. And we know that, you know, there's a huge issue with property taxes. So specifically, what do you mean when you say back property taxes? Can these organizations be on payment plans? Can they, you know, what does that look like?
Absolutely. If you show them that you are on a payment plan and you're making payments, substantial payments towards your property taxes, we definitely accept you. We're mostly looking at bad actors. If you haven't paid taxes on the number of properties that you already own, we don't want to transfer properties to that organization. As you know, the reason why we actually have the properties in the first place is because, you know, the taxes weren't paid on those. So we just make sure that you are either you have no taxes or you're in the payment plan.
All right, and what's the website that our faith leaders can go to apply once again?
That is buildingdetroit.org.
Perfect. Jason, I want to come to you. You know, there's so much still happening in the city, even in the wake of COVID, but I really want to get a sense from you, particularly in HRD, how has development and, you know, capacity support to the faith community changed in the wake of COVID? How has it affected that?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, things have been crazy. It's just over a year now, right? I think March 13th was our last day in the office, and as you can see, I'm working from home. I'm downtown working from home, but it's been great how actually efficient we've become with our new way of working. So, you know, all our teams at the city, almost everybody is still working from home. There's some folks that are going into the offices, you know, part of the day or part of the week, but for the most part, we're working remotely, and we've been able to become pretty efficient. All our programs are still running the same. Luckily, we had already started the process of automating a lot of things, like in the building safety, engineering, and environment department. You know, you can apply for a lot of your permits online. You can apply for plan review. We do the meetings, the pre-plan review that Julio was talking about earlier. You know, that stuff's all done online now. So in a lot of ways, we've become more efficient because we're not wasting time between those meetings, right? We're not having to walk, you know, across the building. We're just hitting enter and switching between meetings. There has been some slowdown with construction. There's a couple projects that I know of where crews have unfortunately gotten sick and then had to quarantine and shut down for a little while. But almost all of those specific projects that I know of have recovered and are up and running again and are either back on track or are ahead of schedule. So, you know, it's been a challenging time for sure, but I think we have all been able to deal with it pretty well. And, you know, it shows the fortitude and just the effort and the strength of all the folks in the city. You know, it's been very, you know, a lot of it's been very upsetting and very sad, but, you know, a lot of things are still moving in the right direction.
Cool. I really quickly just want to recenter the conversation to all of us, because we talk about this stuff often and we talk this language every day, that we should state out our acronyms that we are using. Earlier on, I said HRD, and I've been dealing with HRD since the beginning of my career. It's Housing and Revitalization, the Housing Revitalization Department. So let's try to stray away from the alphabet soup if we can. Brianna, I know that folks are putting things in the chat, but I want to remind everybody that I am zooming in from my mobile phone. So Brianna, you would have to interrupt me so that I can get questions in because I can't see them without leaving the screen.
Okay.
Okay, cool. Yeah, just Orlando, just let us know when you would like to kind of move towards some of the questions in the chat.
Okay, for sure. We'll give this conversation about 10 more minutes. Jason, I want to follow up with you about some of the current developments that the city of Detroit and even the state. I want to ask you about MISTA, the Michigan State Housing Development. I can't remember what the A is from, and some of the projects that are authority, yes. Some of the projects that MISTA and the city of Detroit and some of our local faith nonprofits are sponsoring, particularly, you know, the I-94 and Gratiot development with my friends at the Detroit Catholic Pastoral Alliance, Sean Thorne and Cleo Bradley. How does a project like that happen? And it is my understanding that that project was able to receive low-income tax credits, LIHTC for short. How many people, how many faith organizations in the city get those LIHTC credits and, you know, are able to partner with Housing Revitalization and the Michigan State Housing Development Authority?
Sure. The Detroit Catholic Pastoral Alliance is a great partner of ours. And, you know, they've been working in that Gratiot Woods neighborhood for over 20 years. And what they've done is very incrementally build up their capacity to be able to do these very large scale developments. You know, when they started, they weren't doing these mixed use buildings like you see there now. And, you know, there's a bakery, there's a school, there's a daycare center, there's, you know, several, you know, dozen affordable and market rate apartments. You know, that corner and that intersection has really changed dramatically because of their investment in the neighborhood. And it's taken a long time to get to that point. But what they've done is they've built up incrementally. And over the years, they've worked closely with the city, and we've invested we talked earlier, our home dollars, our community development block grant dollars have helped fund the rehab of some of the existing buildings and then assembling the land. We had to do a lot of demolition in that neighborhood to clear and to get it ready for development. And so they've built that capacity to get up to the point to be able to become competitive for those low-income housing tax credits. Because, you know, each year, you know, there's probably about somewhere around 50 projects that are applying. And what's difficult is the projects in the city of Detroit, we're really trying to focus on our neighborhoods, and we're trying to build back opportunities for people to live in the neighborhoods and have access to a variety of housing types. And who we're competing with a lot of the times is we're competing with Grand Rapids and Lansing and Flint, but they're doing all their projects right in the downtown area. So the competitive process kind of favors them because they have a lot of the existing conditions in place that support the type of development we're doing. Whereas, you know, we're doing these in neighborhoods that are transitioning and building. So, you know, it is very.
So we only get a few a year. We only get a few LIHTC projects a year. Lisa Johannan is on here, I think, from the Christian, Central Detroit Christian, who, you know, is a pioneer on that front as well. I want to ask you really quickly, and I'm going to move on to Julio. Some churches already have land, right? And some churches have land that is vacant, and some have land with structures on them. What does the process look like for new build construction in the city of Detroit, or rehabbing an existing structure in the city of Detroit? And that question was directed to Jason, but if Julio wants to jump in or anybody else.
Yeah, I could see Julio wanting to talk about the design process there, so go for it.
Yeah, you know, the process is pretty much the same for both. Obviously, I think the rehab is much quicker because you have that existing building and it's already standing. And I think that getting that going for a developer is much quicker and much easier to do so. But in terms of the city processes for getting that through the entitlement process is pretty much the same. What we always like to push for any type of development, whether it's a building or even a land-based project, that is agricultural, is again pushing those projects through the preliminary plan review process, which is a free meeting that involves BSEED, PDD, planning and development, and buildings and safety.
Did you say a free
engineering.
meeting? Is there a point
It's
where the
free
meetings
meeting.
are going to begin to cost?
The meeting is completely free. So as long as you have an idea and you have initial drawings that support that idea, we invite anybody to come in. We invite the developer to organize that meeting, and we ourselves are the ones who set that up and provide you, as we've been doing for the past year, a Zoom link to that meeting. And at that meeting, that developer presents their project, and we provide feedback and review again on zoning, design, any issues related to stormwater and things of that nature. And then what's great about that meeting is that you leave at the end, about a week or so after that meeting, we provide you with a summary of the meeting and the processes that you have to go through in order to get your project through permitting, and whether you'll have to go through Board of Zoning Appeals or have any other hearing or have to meet with any other commissions or boards in order to get your project approved. And then after you have, after that meeting, once you have that process outlined, you move forward with your permitting process through Buildings and Safety Department. So it's a great way to understand the steps that are required for permitting, but also understand where your project falls in terms of zoning and whether you have to meet with any other departments or commissions in order to get your project approved.
I appreciate that sentiment, Julio. I want to ask a follow-up question to that, especially to help some of these faith organizations sort of save time and capacity, because a lot of these organizations are very small. Is there sort of, in terms of design, a design document that faith-led developers and organizations can refer to sort of limit the amount of work after that initial free meeting? Does the city of Detroit have design standards around these kind of quality, affordable housing development?
So we currently don't at the moment. If you are in a historic district, that's quite different. They do have specific guidelines related to that local designated district, which could be acquired through the Historic District Commission. And I believe it's on their website as well, detroitmi.gov/HDC. Or you can contact one of the staff members and they'll provide you with those historic guidelines. But currently, citywide standards for design are not available. We are currently working on doing something like that, where we have a list of standards that developers or builders can look into and have an idea of what the city's looking for before even coming to us for feedback on the project.
Yeah, I think that'd be helpful, right?
Yeah.
A list of standards that everyone can refer to, instead of sounds like a little bit of an ad hoc process right now. That can be that can be laborious to a small faith-led organization, right? Trying to figure out what it is you guys want.
Yeah, currently we're definitely open to reviewing any project and every project that's out there. So if there's any interest in meeting with the city, we actually recommend it because it provides us with a view of what you're trying to do before you spend money on an architect or on a design, and it will give us the opportunity to give you what we think And it could save you some time and money in the long term because you go away with an understanding of what the city's looking for before you contact a designer or architect.
Perfect segue, Julio. I know we're going to spend a lot of tomorrow talking about money, but I want to talk about money just a little bit because that is, I don't want any elephants in this discussion, and money sometimes can be an elephant in our discussions. Jason, you talked a little bit about the Detroit Housing from the Futures Fund and some other dollars out of your department. And my specific question is, for the faith leader that sees all of these pledges coming into the city of Detroit, we just saw a $500 million pledge to the city of Detroit. All of this money is flowing in the city. Where do the churches, where do the faith leaders come in at, and how can they get some of that capital to begin to close that gap? Tomorrow, our faith leaders, you're going to hear a lot about capital stacks and performers and how to put together a deal and put together the numbers. But I just want to throw this out there today to Jason. How can they get some of this money that's flowing?
Yeah, there's a lot of different resources that are noted in the paper all the time, and there's a lot of confusion around what's available, right? The main funding that comes from the city itself to support development is, as I mentioned earlier, through the funding that we receive through the federal government, through the U.S. Housing and Urban Development Department, HUD, and it comes in the form of those community development block grant funds and those home dollars. And really, the city looks at the faith-based community as similar to the other for-profit developers that are doing work in the city. And we want to support their projects. And a main goal of ours is to support mixed income and affordable housing, right? We want to see a mix of that across the city and have housing types available for a wide range of people. So those dollars are all awarded competitively, and they're really offered twice a year through what we call, it's called our NOFA. It's the Notice of Funding Availability. And it usually opens up in May and in October, November in the fall. And really, it's an application process. You can go to our website right now, which is www.detroitmi.gov/HRD, and go under the section for developers. And you can click on the link and see exactly what that application entails. Really, we want to know about the if you control the land now, or how you're going to be purchasing it, when you're going to purchase it. We want to know about the experience that you have, like what development that you've done in the past. We want to know, who you're targeting, what type of housing are you going to provide. Really, but the application is there, and it doesn't change very much. It's tweaked a little bit each round, but you can get a direct look at what it's like now and expect what you'll be applying for coming up here in the spring. And really, the thing that I want to point out is we always have a pre-application meeting where you're welcome to come and ask all the questions that you have. And then on top of that, talk to us while you're filling out the application. Both my division in housing and revitalization, the public-private partnerships, we're broken up into different regions. So we'll connect you with the person who's responsible for that specific region. There's an East, West, and Central region. And then there's also folks on the housing underwriting team that are the ones that review the applications that are submitted and score those. And if you have questions, we'll work with you and help you improve your application and make it better. And so don't be scared to involve us from the very beginning. We'd like to support you in any way we can.
We got about 6 minutes left, and I want to get to questions in the chat. So I'm going to ask Michael and Brianna. Okay,
yeah,
go for it.
So we got one from Janine. What is the process to acquire property or land once you are a Detroit Land Bank Authority community partner? And that's for Carla.
Yes, once you become a community partner, you're assigned to a project manager based on the region that your organization is in. The project manager helps you, if you may have had property selected already, so we vet to see whether it is land bank owned. If not, you talk to the project manager about what type of project that you want to do, and they help find land that we may own in the area. Once you find the land, we have you get a project plan together along with proof of finances to show that you can get the project complete. The project is then vetted internally by our internal staff, and it's taken across the street to the city. So our city partners, HRD, planning department, as well as the DGC and the Department of Neighborhoods, they review your project as well. And then it is taken to our board for approval.
Very good, very good. Brianna, I don't know if you want to take a few. I can do them. It's up to you.
You can do the next one. I just saw one come in.
Okay.
I'll do one after.
Okay, looking to, so Pastor Tony Lett from Salvation and Praise Outreach Ministries looking to purchase a building for a community service program. I would really love to create transitional housing for women, youth. I guess this is an open question for any of our panelists. What are the first steps? What should they be looking to get started?
I would suggest going to the city's property page, www.detroitmi.gov/properties, and we have links to show what properties we own. And there's an online application there. They'll ask pretty basic information like what you would like to do with the property, how you're going to pay to renovate it, what's your timeline, things like that. And then it gets submitted electronically to the Detroit Building Authority that reviews it and sends it over to the rest of the team at the city. And I would suggest, I'll put my email in the chat here and follow up with me directly to let me know that that application is coming, and we'll keep an eye out for it and do whatever we can to help you move forward with that project.
Awesome, thank you, Jason. Oh, go ahead, Orlando.
I also want to ask this question because the streets be talking. So I got to ask it. How does the city define affordable? What does affordable mean? And any of you can take that question.
That's now that's an easy question. Thanks, Orlando. So there's different standards depending on what type of funding go into a project. But really what our goal is to provide, and I mentioned this earlier, a variety of housing that meets the needs of everybody in the city. So, that's meeting the needs across the spectrum. Now, when you talk about a project that is looking for tax abatements that the city is going to support, there's a minimum expected by city council. They usually ask for at least 20% of the units to be provided for folks making 80% of the area median income. So that's around like $30,000 a year. So that's the minimum. When you start looking at home, the city's home and community development block grant dollars, you start talking about a higher level of affordability, which is usually around that 60% of the area median income. So, so starting to meet a greater need. And then there's also even greater need provided when you start working on projects with the Detroit Housing Commission and some of the voucher programs that they have, and they'll require units at the 60% area median income. So, around $18,000 a year. So there's really a wide range, but the goal is to make sure that we're providing housing for everybody.
Cool. I'm sorry, Michael, I interrupted you.
You're good. Brianna, do you have a few other questions from the chat?
I think there was one more in the chat. It says, is there any influence in Highland Park? And then I believe that answer is no. And then the last thing I wanted to mention is that we're going to go ahead, if there are no additional questions, move into our breakout sessions, where we'll talk to some faith-based leaders and organizations about their experience in the development process. And then from there, you guys can talk about where your church or your organization is in their process and figure out if there's any helpful steps or things that need to happen for you guys to complete your projects.
Cool. I
Sounds
just want to
good?
thank Jason, Julio, and Carla for being in the hot seat for about an hour. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. This was great.
Thank you for the
Thank
opportunity.
you.
Thank you.
And thank you, Orlando, for facilitating the conversation. We really, really appreciate it. And I think that, and I hope that everybody got some very helpful information as a part of this panel discussion. Our breakout sessions will have 4 groups. We'll break you guys out in a moment, but I wanted to introduce you guys quickly to some folks that Enterprise works with regularly and that we feel have gone through their development processes and had their trials, tribulations, barriers, and came out on top. Paul Propson, he's the Chief Executive Officer for Catholic Charities USA. Janine Hatcher is the Executive Director for Genesis Hope. Lisa Johannan is the Executive Director for Housing for the Central Detroit Christian Community Corporation. John Thorne is the Executive Director for the Detroit Catholic Pastoral Alliance. We talked about that a little bit with Jason earlier. And so they will be in each of the breakout rooms. You'll hear a little bit about their stories, and then we'll get into where you guys are. Thank you.
All right, so bear with me a moment. I'm gonna split everyone up, and I just gotta make sure that the leaders aren't in the same room. So give me a moment. All right, so you should be receiving an invitation to go into your breakout session. So we'll see you in about 20 minutes. Thank you.
You're muted, Mike.
Never happens to me. Luckily, my screen was small, so y'all didn't see me just rambling away. Clearly you did. Getting some good feedback in the chat. So it looks like these conversations were lively. So thank you all. I'm gonna go ahead and just pull our presentation back up.
Also, thank you guys. In the meantime, just wanted to say thank you for everybody to stay on, have these conversations in the breakout rooms, get to know each other a little bit better. I think that it's going to be helpful as you guys go forward with your projects.
So it looks like we're missing maybe one more group. I think that it should end automatically, but let me.
And then while we're waiting for that to happen, if there are any members of American Heart Association or Enterprise Community Partners that was a part of the different breakout groups, if you guys could probably like talk about the experience in the breakout rooms and some of the things that some of the participants discussed, just very quickly so that we can kind of, get a little report out about some of the things and suggestions that come along with this development journey.
Absolutely. If you want, I can kick it off. I was in the group breakout session with John, so a huge shout out to John. He was an awesome moderator. We had some amazing questions. And Lisa, she was part of our group too. We had some amazing questions that came up, and I think a theme was really know your plan. Have a plan in place. Really looking at what are some ways to engage the community around those properties, how to engage those members in having a buy-in in the project that you will be presenting or working on. We had some amazing questions and really looking at, co-ops, what projects have had success, and how to go about getting that success. And I think John's message was key, was about having that plan. It's all about having that plan, understanding what you want, and then bringing those along that will make that plan happen. John, did you have any other comments?
Yes, and just trying to make sure, I'm sorry, I got booted out for a second, but just trying to make sure that you have that land. Acquisition is so key, especially in many neighborhoods where the face of the neighborhood is changing and people from outside of the city are coming in to acquire land, and making sure that you have a great relationship with the city. And so our relationship is with Jason Friedman, who was on the call earlier, just trying to make sure that you have their buy-in and their support as you keep looking at how the city can also engage, not only just in funding sources, but that they're engaged in your proposal for the long run.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Mitzi, and thank you, John. I'll go next. So we had Janine Hatcher, who was a fantastic facilitator. So Janine, thank you so much for your contribution thus far and for leading out in one of our breakouts. A couple of themes that came up was the structure, having a separate nonprofit. Janine said, from your church, if you are a church organization, which is a 501c nonprofit, perhaps having a separate nonprofit will probably be most beneficial for development purposes, separate from that church organization. She also talked about the partnerships, especially in terms of funding, hiring different contractors, architects, and things like that. Partnerships are key, especially for organizations that are new to the development process and maybe just getting their first swing at this. We were fortunate enough to have Julio on the call. So he asked a fantastic question about finding a designer and an architect, which Janine was able to kind of fold some of her responses from partnerships within that answer. And she also talked about the challenge of funding affordable units. It's very competitive. The walk scores, because downtown and midtown are so built up, and they have great walk scores, oftentimes in neighborhoods in terms of affordable housing can't compete. And she also talked about the need for advocacy and policy changes. especially when it relates to walk scores, knowing that walk scores are used by MISTA and other organizations. So, Janine, I don't know if you wanted to add any other color or nuance to those to that report out. Janine, are you still with us?
I'm sorry, I was on mute. I just wanted to add, thank you for the opportunity to pay it forward. And I know that there were some additional questions that folks had. And if you don't mind, I'll share my email address in the chat, and folks could feel free to give me a call because somebody helped me. And so I'm definitely willing to help someone else. So thank you.
Very good.
So I can hop in too. I had the chance to be in Paul Propson's breakout session, and we had some really good dialogue. Some of the things I think that stood out, we talked a little bit about, building a project that will be resilient, sort of in the face of, turbulence in light of, what we've experienced with COVID-19. And Paul talked about just making sure that we're building strong organizations, not carrying significant amounts of debt, and really staying on top of those kinds of things to make sure that you're fluid and can withstand sort of that turbulence that might come, which I thought was great. And then also the importance of partnership. These initiatives, require strong partnerships. And so in Paul's experience, their project being based on health and housing, talked about, really working with some of the health systems and identifying, I think he said some mental health component partners also were very critical to their development, and just making sure you have that foundation of strong partners that are going to sort of get you on the right footing for your project. And one key piece too, I thought was good, that someone asked a question around barriers and, being in the faith setting, that, you might often struggle with gaining consensus within the church leadership when you're trying to, endeavor with one of these projects. And so, Paul talked about really just, you're not going to get everyone, right, to agree, right? So just trying to find as much consensus as you can. Hopefully you have a strong lead or someone who has that sort of top level authority that can sort of help to build some consensus and be able to make a decision. And maybe in the absence of that, also working on building a strong foundation of community support, because that would really, help fill any gaps that the church leaders might be struggling with. But if the community has a strong voice as a part of your project, that could be helpful in light of that barrier. Paul, do you have anything as well that you would like to mention? I feel like we had a nice, robust conversation. Anything you'd like to add to those thoughts?
I think you covered it, Kristen.
Okay. Well, thanks, Paul, for your facilitation of that session. It was great dialogue, and thanks to everyone who participated in there as well. Back to you, Mike.
All right, thank you for reporting out, Christian. So Lisa, I know we had to do a quick switcheroo there and put you in another group, but I hope you were able to have a pretty good conversation. So Ebony, were you in that group? Did you have anything or any items to report out on? Any highlights?
Well, I'll say, and since Ebony might be disconnected in some way, we were a quieter group, but had some good dialogue. Richard Cannon brought up the point of, maybe there's just a place we need to have for those of us who are doing affordable housing, particularly when we talk about gap financing, where we can just talk to each other and try to figure and problem solve and figure out how to jump through some of these hurdles that are placed before us. And I thought that was a very good thought. We tend to be very siloed. I would agree with him on that.
Lisa, this is Stacy. Do you mind if I add a little bit there? I know we tried to, he tried to tee me up for a question and we kind of ran out of time, but so part of, I've been working with Richard with his preservation projects, and As many of you may know, Enterprise has partnered with the city to do to work on the preservation partnership. So our focus is exclusively on preserving what is existing today. But to Richard's point, I do think that there is a great need to get people who are working in this affordable housing space together to problem solve. And I think that there are some, technical assistance providers like Enterprise and Cinnair. But I think it's a really great suggestion to see if we can bring actual affordable housing developers and owners together, both preservation and new product, to talk to each other. So I wrote that down. I want to kind of chew that over with our other enterprise partners to see where there's an opportunity there. But I will say, as part of the preservation partnership, we are building a resource directory. And so I think it's some of the things that we have already discussed in terms of tools and resources, but we're still working out what kind of format that's going to look like and where it's going to live. But hopefully that is a piece of the puzzle here. So Richard, I really appreciate that suggestion. The other thing I wanted to mention, I did throw it into the chat, the discussion about the walk score. MSHDA actually adopted the use of the Enterprise Opportunity 360 tool. So they have gotten away from using the walk score because, as you guys all know, there was just limitations to that tool, and MSHDA wants to make sure that they're putting their resources where they're going to have the greatest impact. And so the Opportunity 360 tool actually does that, and it really does a better job of explaining the opportunities and resources in the community. So I dropped a link in the chat for you guys if you want to check it out. It's something that you can use outside of your LIHTC application to tell that story about why your affordable housing is needed in your neighborhood and some of the other resources that will be accessible to your residents once you do that. So if I can be of any other assistance in this topic, just please let me know.
Thank you. Absolutely. So we're doing pretty good on time here. I would love to just open it up for any additional thoughts from our breakout leaders. We probably need to make the breakout session a little longer, so stay tuned for tomorrow's session. But yeah, just any additional thoughts before we turn it back over to Brianna to go over our assessment.
Michael, I was going to add to that too, real quick. From the conversation with Lisa, Richard, Cannon, Stacy, and Ebony, there was a suggestion about maybe some sort of collaboration, or not collaboration, but meeting of the minds, I would say, for folks who are doing development, because a lot of people are going through the same struggles and journeys. In Enterprise's past history of working with faith-based organizations, there's actually a group that meets that's in the New York area of faith-based leaders and organizations, and they meet separately from Enterprise, but they come together and say, hey, Enterprise, we're having issues with X, Y, and Z. We can't get through the city. We don't have any resources for, funding, and we need help. And so it's been very helpful because that group came together on their own. But what's happening now is Enterprise is able to, based on its relationships with others, generate conversations and be that liaison that these organizations need so that they can get their projects going. So that might be a suggestion about moving forward in some way, trying to work together if you guys have, common issues and concerns so that you can get them answered together.
Get you to a result, which is great. Yeah.
That's a fantastic idea. Sort of like a think tank, where people can maybe come together and convene. More than likely, if there's barriers and challenges, we're probably all experiencing somewhat similar challenges. So why not discuss them and figure out how we can all move forward together? So, so great suggestion, and that's a great item from that conversation. Would any of the other breakout leaders like to respond to that idea? Is there something similar to that already in the works? Any suggestions in terms of that idea? Okay. Hearing none.
This is John. I don't know if one here at the city. I was on the call, through Enterprise with some other faith leaders and groups that did things, but nothing here locally, not looking at housing and things like that.
Thank you, John. All right, so I just want to thank our breakout leaders once again. Thank you for the work. Thank you for your commitment to this community, for this very, very timely and needed issue that we're dealing with in terms of affordable housing. So we want to thank you once again for joining us today and being able to share your expertise, share your information, your resources, and your organization with us today. We truly appreciate it. So with that, I'll turn it over to Brianna to go a little bit deeper into our assessment. Everyone that registered should have been given a link to the assessment, but we want to talk a little bit about that to make sure that we are up to speed in terms of that part of the process. So Brianna, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Michael. So again, we are encouraging everyone to fill out our faith-based development assessment. It is, like I said, 45 questions that really just dig into where you guys are and what you need to accomplish so that you can get your project off the ground. It deals with collaborations, it deals with partnerships, working with the city, things like that. And not just that live in the Detroit area, but anybody in the Southeast Michigan area, you will have to ask yourself this question in order for you to move forward with your project. So if you can go to the next slide. There are 6 categories to the 45 questions, and they're broken up pretty well. You're not gonna have answers to all 45 questions, but you should be able, after having the conversation today, to look at the vision and operational piece of your organization. If you guys have already acquired land or you already have land in your possession, you should be able to, have that conversation today. And then tomorrow, conversations about your financial health as an organization and where you guys are in your development piece, you should be able to say, hey, I might need to partner with another organization to get this. So make sure you take the time to go through this assessment. Please turn it back into us by the 14th, which will be when we will collect those. And just to let you guys know, tomorrow, again, we'll be having a conversation with some financial institutions about what types of things that you guys need to look out for when doing a development project, making sure that the organization is healthy enough to be able to do a project magnitude and being able to prepare yourself financially to get the project done. Next slide. And that's it. We want to thank everybody for their participation today. Want to thank our facilitator, Orlando Bailey, for facilitating the panel discussion, Jason Friedman, Julio Sedano, Carla Marshall for the panel, Lisa Johannan, John Thorne, Paul Propson, tongue twist today. And we want to thank everybody else who was able to participate as well, from American Heart Association and Enterprise, and anybody that I might not have mentioned just now in conversation. Again, tomorrow we'll have another conversation about finances. Thank you.
And thank you all for joining. And I'm not sure if we were able to be joined by any of our partners from Kresge, but if you are on the call, we thank you so much for your partnership. And we will see you all back here, same place tomorrow. So thank you all, and have a good afternoon.